Elizabeth Stone had never imagined herself wearing a uniform in her own daughter's home. Yet here I stood, in a gray dress with a white collar that Rebecca had presented with what she probably thought was generosity. "So you'll look professional when my guests come by," she'd explained, not meeting my eyes. Professional. As if 40 years as a high school principal hadn't been professional. As if raising her alone after her father died when she was 12 hadn't required professionalism of the highest order. As if the financial crisis that had wiped out my retirement savings somehow erased a lifetime of accomplishment and dignity. "I don't feed extra mouths," my daughter had said 3 weeks ago, when I'd finally gathered the courage to ask if I could stay with her family temporarily while I sorted out my finances. "But I do need help with the children and the house. I could hire you as our nanny. You'd earn your keep, and it would solve both our problems." Her tone had made it clear this wasn't a request for assistance between family members, but a business transaction. A reluctant accommodation of an inconvenient parent. I had stared at this stranger who had once been my bright, compassionate child, wondering when she had transformed into someone who could reduce her own mother to the status of hired help. "That's very practical," I had managed to reply, swallowing my shock. "When would you like me to start?" And so I had moved into the small guest room at the back of Rebecca and Michael's sprawling colonial in Westfield's most prestigious neighborhood, where she was now a prominent real estate agent and he was a hedge fund manager. Where my 3 grandchildren, Sophia, 10, Maxwell, 8, and little Amelia, 4, were being raised with every material advantage, and I was quickly discovering a troubling lack of emotional nurturing. I smoothed the gray dress, adjusted my glasses, and studied my reflection in the guest bathroom mirror. My silver hair, once my crown of distinction as an educator, now made me look like a central casting choice for grandmother help. But beneath that silver hair was the same strategic mind that had navigated decades of school board politics, parent confrontations, and educational crises. Rebecca had forgotten or chosen to ignore what I was capable of. "Elizabeth," my daughter's voice, sharp with impatience, shattered my reflection. "The Caldwells will be here in 20 minutes, and Amelia's still in her play clothes. Please get her changed into the outfit I laid out." "Right away," I called back, my voice pleasant and accommodating. As I headed toward Amelia's room, I passed Rebecca in the hallway, resplendent in a designer dress, diamond earrings catching the light as she checked her appearance in the hall mirror. She barely glanced at me, already focused on the evening ahead. A dinner party with the Caldwells, who apparently represented potential high-value clients and social connections. "Mr. Caldwell sits on the hospital board," she'd informed me earlier, her tone making it clear how important this dinner was to her ambitions. "And Mrs. Caldwell chairs the committee for the summer gala. Michael needs Jonathan's support for his hospital project, and I need Diana to consider me for the gala committee." What Rebecca didn't know, what she had been too self-absorbed to ask, was that I had served on that same hospital board for 15 years before retiring. That Jonathan Caldwell had been a young doctor when I'd helped secure the funding for his first research initiative. That Diana Caldwell and I had worked together on educational outreach programs connecting the hospital to local schools. But Rebecca would learn soon enough. All of Westfield would learn exactly who Elizabeth Stone was and who her daughter had become. Because in the 3 weeks since accepting my new position, I had been laying the groundwork for a lesson my daughter would never forget. The dinner party tonight was simply the opening act. My first week as the help had been an education in who my daughter had become. Rebecca rose at 6 a.m. daily, spent precisely 30 minutes with her children over breakfast, then handed off all parental responsibilities to me with a list of instructions that would have made a military commander blush. "Maxwell needs to practice piano for 45 minutes before any screen time. Sophia has ballet at 4, but she'll try to claim she's too tired. Don't let her manipulate you. Amelia naps at 1. Not a minute later or she'll be impossible at bedtime. The groceries need to be organic, but watch for sales because the food budget is tight this month. The irony of pinching pennies on groceries while Rebecca wore Louboutin heels was not lost on me. Michael, my son-in-law, was largely an absent figure, leaving before the children woke and returning after their bedtime 3 days out of 5. When present, he was physically there but mentally elsewhere, his attention divided between his phone and whatever sporting event played on the massive television in his study. He treated me with distant politeness, clearly viewing me as Rebecca's problem rather than family. The children, however, were a revelation. Beneath Sophia's prickly preteen defiance lay a sensitive girl who wrote poetry she hid under her mattress. Maxwell's obsession with video games masked an aptitude for music that flourished with the slightest encouragement. And Amelia, too young to hide her nature, offered unconditional affection that made my heart ache with memories of Rebecca at the same age. By day 3, I had begun making mental notes of the household dynamics. By day 5, I had started testing small interventions, subtle changes to routines, minor adjustments to the emotional temperature of interactions. By the end of the first week, I had developed a comprehensive understanding of the cracks in the foundation of my daughter's carefully constructed life. The second week, I began meeting the neighbors. "You must be Rebecca's mother." Pamela Carson from next door had called over the fence while I supervised Amelia in the backyard. "We've heard so much about you." I highly doubted that, given Rebecca's determined efforts to position me as an employee rather than a relative. "All good things, I hope," I replied with a warm smile. "Well, Rebecca mentioned you're helping with the children. Such a blessing to have family support." Pamela's tone was friendly, but her eyes held curiosity. "I don't think she mentioned what you did before retirement." "I was in education," I said simply, watching her reaction. "At Westfield High." Pamela's eyes widened slightly. "Westfield High? Not you couldn't be Principal Stone." I inclined my head modestly. "For 26 years. "Oh my goodness. My oldest had you as principal. David Carson? Class of 2008? You wrote him the most wonderful college recommendation. He's a cardiothoracic surgeon now at Mass General." "David. Of course I remember him. Brilliant mind, and he organized that fundraiser for the Children's Hospital after his little brother's recovery." I smiled genuinely this time. "Please give him my regards." "I will." "I can't believe Rebecca didn't mention, Pamela faltered, suddenly realizing the incongruity between my former position and current role. "It's wonderful you're able to help with the grandchildren." "Yes," I agreed pleasantly. Rebecca felt it would be best if I earned my keep. The slight shock in Pamela's expression confirmed what I'd suspected. Rebecca had portrayed my presence very differently to her social circle. Within 24 hours, I was certain the disconnect between Rebecca's narrative and reality would ripple through the neighborhood. Similar scenes played out as I escorted the children to activities, did grocery shopping, and handled school pickups. At each encounter, with other parents, shopkeepers, teachers, I was unfailingly pleasant, impeccably dignified, and strategically forthcoming about both my past and present circumstances. "Principal Stone, what are you doing with the Franklin children?" "Just helping my daughter, temporarily. Financial setbacks, you know how it is." Rebecca was kind enough to offer me employment as her nanny. The reactions were invariably the same. Initial delight at recognizing me, followed by confusion, then poorly concealed dismay at the situation. Each interaction planted seeds that would soon germinate into something Rebecca hadn't anticipated. By the third week, I had established connections with key figures in Rebecca's social ecosystem. Charlotte Winters, whose garden club meetings Rebecca desperately wanted to join, had been a teacher under my leadership. James Peterson, whose wife chaired the very hospital committee Rebecca coveted, had served with me on the library board. Even Rebecca's real estate broker, Elaine Montgomery, turned out to be the mother of a student I'd particularly championed. Elizabeth, I had no idea you were Rebecca's mother, Elaine had exclaimed when we ran into each other at the supermarket. Why on earth are you doing her grocery shopping? I live with Rebecca now, I explained, my tone light, but allowing the implications to hover. I help with the children and the house. Live with, but I thought. Elaine's confusion was evident. Rebecca told me her mother was traveling through Europe during her retirement. So that was the fiction my daughter had created. I'm afraid my financial advisor made some unfortunate investments, I said, the perfect blend of dignity and controlled vulnerability in my voice. The European adventure had to be indefinitely postponed. Elaine's expression had shifted from confusion to something harder. I see. How fortunate that Rebecca could accommodate you. Yes, I agreed mildly. Though, I do miss my independence. That evening, as I prepared dinner while Rebecca reviewed property listings at the kitchen island, my daughter had looked up with unusual attentiveness. Did you run into Elaine Montgomery at Bristol Farms today? I continued chopping vegetables, my movements unhurried. Yes, we had a lovely chat. She was one of my parents at Westfield High, you know. Her daughter Melissa went to Princeton on a full scholarship. Rebecca set down her papers. What exactly did you talk about? This and that. She was surprised to see me doing your shopping. A tense silence followed. Mom, I'd appreciate it if you didn't discuss our arrangement with my professional connections. I looked up, blinking innocently. Our arrangement? You mean my employment? I thought you wanted me to look professional for your guests. Yes, but that doesn't mean there's no need to get into details about why you're staying with us. I see. I returned to my chopping. Would you prefer I continue telling people I'm traveling through Europe? That seems to be what they've heard. Rebecca had the grace to flush slightly. I didn't want people making assumptions. About your financial situation. Or ours. People talk. They certainly do, I agreed pleasantly, scraping the vegetables into a waiting pan. Speaking of talking, the Caldwells are coming for dinner tomorrow, correct? Rebecca's expression instantly shifted to one of focused anticipation. Yes, and it's incredibly important. Jonathan can help Michael secure backing for his hospital development project, and Diana's gala committee connection would be transformative for my real estate network. I remember Jonathan from the hospital board, I remarked casually. He was doing fascinating work with pediatric cardiac interventions. Rebecca froze. You know Dr. Caldwell? Of course. I served on that board for 15 years. We secured his first major research grant together. I stirred the vegetables as if this were the most ordinary conversation. And Diana and I worked on several educational initiatives connecting the hospital to local schools. She has a weakness for chocolate souffle, by the way. I've already planned it for dessert. The sound of Rebecca's papers falling to the floor was immensely satisfying. You never told me you knew the Caldwells. You never asked what boards I served on during my career, I pointed out mildly. Or anything about my professional connections, really. But this changes. Rebecca was visibly recalculating. Mom, it would be incredibly helpful if you could remind them of your previous connection. Put in a good word for Michael and me. Of course, dear. I'm here to help. I smiled reassuringly, while mentally adjusting my timeline. Rebecca's reaction had confirmed my assessment. Her social aspirations were central to her sense of security and identity. She defined herself through external validation and status, which made her exquisitely vulnerable to the lesson I was about to teach. Diana Caldwell's delighted exclamation echoed through Rebecca's meticulously decorated foyer. Elizabeth Stone. I can't believe it's you. I stepped forward from my position near the kitchen door, where Rebecca had stationed me to serve appetizers, and accepted Diana's enthusiastic embrace. Diana, how wonderful to see you. It's been too long. Years. Not since you retired. What are you doing here? Diana looked between me and Rebecca, who stood frozen by the entrance, an artificial smile plastered on her face. Didn't Rebecca tell you? I'm living here now, helping with the children and the house. I gestured to my gray uniform dress with good-humored self-deprecation. Hence the professional attire. Jonathan Caldwell, distinguished in his tailored suit, stepped forward to take my hand warmly. Elizabeth, this is an unexpected pleasure. The hospital board hasn't been the same without your fundraising prowess. That pediatric wing we developed wouldn't exist without you. You're too kind, Jonathan. Your medical expertise was the true driving force. I turned to include my visibly stunned daughter and uncomfortably shifting son-in-law. Rebecca and Michael, I didn't realize you hadn't mentioned to the Caldwells that I was living here. It must have slipped my mind, Rebecca managed, her knuckles white around her wine glass. Mom has been such a help with the children since her financial setback. Financial setback? Diana's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. What happened? I waved dismissively, projecting dignified resilience. Oh, the usual story. Trusted the wrong financial advisor. Then the market crashed. At my age, there's little time to recover. But Rebecca's employment offer was a godsend. Employment? Jonathan looked between us, confusion evident. As the family nanny and housekeeper, I clarified pleasantly. It's allowed me to remain independent rather than becoming a burden. Now, may I offer you some of these canapés? I made them this afternoon. The atmosphere in the room had shifted perceptibly. Michael stepped forward, clearly attempting damage control. Elizabeth has been incredibly generous with her time. We couldn't manage without her, especially with my hospital development project taking so much attention lately. Ah yes, the outpatient surgical center. Jonathan nodded, accepting the social redirect, but with a new reserve in his manner. I've reviewed the preliminary proposal. Ambitious scope. We think it fills a critical community need, Michael responded eagerly. As the men moved toward Michael's study to discuss the project, Diana linked her arm through mine. Elizabeth, I want to hear everything that's happened since you retired. Rebecca, you don't mind if I steal your mother for a moment, do you? I'm sure the canapés can wait. Rebecca had no choice but to nod agreement, though her expression suggested she'd rather do anything else. Of course not. Mom, just make sure dinner stays on schedule. Yes, Rebecca, I answered with perfect deference that made Diana's eyebrows rise even higher. In the living room, safely out of Rebecca's earshot, Diana leaned close. Elizabeth Stone, what on earth is going on? You're wearing a uniform in your daughter's home? The Elizabeth the First knew would never. Life takes unexpected turns, I interrupted gently. Rebecca and Michael have been kind enough to provide a solution to my housing dilemma by employing you as domestic help. Diana's voice held unmistakable disapproval. You are one of the most respected educational leaders in this community. You mentored half the successful women in Westfield, including me. And now you're serving canapés to dinner guests. I allowed vulnerability to show briefly. When you've lost your financial security at 65, pride becomes a luxury. Rebecca was clear that she doesn't feed extra mouths without compensation. Diana's sharp intake of breath was exactly the reaction I'd anticipated. Those were her exact words. To her own mother, I said nothing, letting my silence confirm the truth. Unbelievable, Diana muttered. Absolutely unbelievable. Does the rest of the community know about this arrangement? I've run into a few former colleagues and parents, I admitted. People have been very kind. I imagine they have, Diana said, her expression hardening in a way that boded poorly for Rebecca's social aspirations. The gala committee would be extremely interested to know how the daughter of Elizabeth Stone treats her own mother. I patted her hand reassuringly. Diana, Please don't let my situation affect your professional relationship with Rebecca. She's under considerable pressure with the children and her career. Pressure doesn't excuse treating family like hired help, Diana replied firmly. Especially not a mother who's sacrificed so much. Everyone knows you turned down the superintendent position to stay close when Rebecca's father died. This conversation was proceeding exactly as I'd hoped, but I maintained my appearance of maternal loyalty. Every family has its complicated dynamics. Elizabeth, Diana said decisively, I'm hosting a small gathering next week for several hospital board members and community leaders. I'd like you to attend as my personal guest. That's very kind, but I'm not sure Rebecca would approve of my attending social functions. Diana's expression could have frozen flame. Rebecca won't be there to disapprove. I'm inviting you, not her. I allowed an appropriate hesitation. I wouldn't want to create tension in the household. Consider it a professional reunion, Diana insisted. Many of your former colleagues will be there. Jonathan, and I can send a car if transportation is an issue. Before I could respond, Rebecca appeared in the doorway, her smile brittle. Dinner is ready whenever you are. Diana rose gracefully. Perfect timing. Your mother and I were just catching up on old times. Did you know she convinced the state legislature to double funding for our school hospital partnership program? Elizabeth's testimony was so powerful that the committee chair was literally moved to tears. Rebecca's smile didn't waver, but her eyes betrayed her discomfort at hearing her nanny praised for professional accomplishments that dwarfed her own. Mom has always been very persuasive. She certainly changed my life, Diana continued pointedly as we moved toward the dining room. I wouldn't have had the confidence to chair the hospital gala without her mentorship during my early teaching years. Throughout dinner, Diana and Jonathan continued to direct conversation toward my past accomplishments and our shared history, while politely but minimally engaging with Rebecca and Michael's obvious attempts to discuss their own projects. The subtle power shift was unmistakable. Rebecca had intended to impress the Caldwells and instead found herself increasingly marginalized in her own home. When I served the chocolate souffle that had once been Diana's favorite at board meetings, her delight was genuine. Elizabeth, you remembered. No one makes souffle like you do. Just a small touch to make the evening special, I replied modestly. Speaking of special, Diana said, turning to Rebecca, I've been meaning to talk to you about the gala committee. Rebecca leaned forward eagerly. Yes? I've been hoping there might be an opening. Actually, we're restructuring the committee this year, Diana explained, her tone pleasant but her eyes cool. We're focusing on members who demonstrate exceptional community values, particularly around family connections and care for older adults. The hospital is launching a major elder care initiative. The targeted message couldn't have been clearer. Rebecca's smile froze as the implications registered. That sounds very worthwhile. I thought so too, Diana agreed pleasantly. In fact, Elizabeth, we could use your expertise on intergenerational programs. Would you consider joining us as a consultant? The position includes a stipend, of course. Rebecca's fork clattered against her plate. Mom is quite busy with her responsibilities here. I'm sure accommodations could be made for such important community work, Diana replied smoothly. After all, family support works both ways, doesn't it? The evening concluded with superficial cordiality masking seismic shifts beneath the surface. As the Caldwells prepared to leave, Diana embraced me warmly. I'll have my assistant call about that gathering next week. And the committee consultation. We have so much to discuss. After they departed, Rebecca rounded on me in the foyer, her voice low but intense. What exactly did you say to Diana? Nothing that wasn't true, I replied calmly. Diana and I have a long professional history. She was naturally curious about my current situation. You undermined me. The gala committee was crucial for my real estate connections. I specifically asked her not to let my situation affect her professional relationship with you, I pointed out. If anything, I tried to support your interests. Rebecca's frustration was palpable. This isn't how tonight was supposed to go. Michael's meeting with Jonathan about the development project was completely overshadowed by everyone fawning over your past achievements. I can't control what the Caldwells choose to discuss, Rebecca. I began collecting dishes with the practiced efficiency I developed over recent weeks. If you'll excuse me, I should finish cleaning up. As I retreated to the kitchen, I heard Michael muttering to Rebecca in the foyer. Jonathan, barely engaged on the development proposal, kept steering the conversation back to community needs and ethical healthcare investment. What the hell happened? What happened, I thought as I methodically loaded the dishwasher, was exactly what I had planned. The Caldwells represented only the opening salvo. Diana's gathering next week would bring me into contact with dozens of influential community members, each of whom would draw their own conclusions about a daughter who reduced her accomplished mother to household staff. The social consequences for Rebecca were already beginning to materialize. Within a week, they would become an avalanche. Diana's small gathering turned out to be 40 of Westfield's most influential residents, hosted in her impeccably landscaped garden. When her promised car arrived at Rebecca's house, I was ready in a simple but elegant blue dress I'd preserved from my working days, a stark contrast to the gray uniform Rebecca had grown accustomed to seeing me wear. "You're going out?" Rebecca had asked that morning, surprise evident as she watched me prepare. "You didn't mention having plans." "Diana Caldwell invited me to a garden party," I explained, applying lipstick with practiced precision. "A reunion of sorts with former colleagues." Rebecca's expression had cycled rapidly through shock, calculation, and forced nonchalance. "That's nice. Will there be many people attending?" "I believe so. Diana mentioned several board members and community leaders." "Perhaps I should come with you," Rebecca suggested, her tone deliberately casual. "As your daughter, I mean, for support." I met her eyes in the mirror. "Diana was quite specific about the guest list, Rebecca. I'm sure she would have mentioned if family members were included." The unspoken reality hung between us. Diana had deliberately excluded Rebecca while inviting me. The social implications weren't lost on my status-conscious daughter, whose expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well, have a nice time," she managed, her voice brittle. "We'll need you back by 6 to help with dinner and bedtime routines." I turned from the mirror, regarding her steadily. "I've prepared casseroles for dinner, laid out the children's clothes, and written down their schedules. This is my first personal outing in the 3 weeks I've lived here, Rebecca. I may be late." Something in my tone, a quiet assertion of boundaries, seemed to catch her off guard. She blinked, then nodded stiffly before retreating from my doorway. Now, as Diana's driver escorted me into her garden transformed by twinkling lights and elegant floral arrangements, I felt a momentary twinge of uncertainty. Was I taking this too far? Was the lesson I intended to teach unnecessarily harsh? Then I remembered Rebecca's cold assessment. I don't feed extra mouths. My decades of sacrifice dismissed, my dignity disregarded, my maternal love reduced to an economic burden. No, the lesson wasn't too harsh. It was precisely what she needed to understand the consequences of treating family as disposable. "Elizabeth." Diana glided forward to greet me, resplendent in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly principal's pension had been. "You look wonderful. So many people are eager to see you." She wasn't exaggerating. Within minutes, I was surrounded by former colleagues, board members, community leaders, people who remembered Principal Stone as a formidable advocate for children and education, not as anyone's uniformed help. "Elizabeth, we've missed your voice at the Education Foundation. The new superintendent doesn't have half your strategic vision. That mentoring program you established is still changing lives." Each conversation reinforced what Rebecca had chosen to forget or ignore. Her mother was a person of significance in this community, someone whose accomplishments and connections had shaped Westfield for decades. And with each interaction, I carefully, strategically allowed the truth of my current circumstances to emerge. Yes, I'm living with Rebecca now. Financial reversals, you know how it is. The uniform? Rebecca feels it's more professional when she has clients visit. No, I don't have much free time. Household responsibilities keep me quite busy. I never complained directly. Never accused. Simply stated facts in a tone of dignified acceptance that allowed listeners to draw their own conclusions. And those conclusions were evident in their expressions. Shock, dismay, and in many cases, a hardening resolve that boded poorly for Rebecca's social aspirations. Midway through the evening, I found myself in conversation with Margaret Whitmore, who chaired the real estate licensing board and whose social influence was legendary in Westfield circles. Elizabeth, I simply cannot believe Rebecca has you working as household staff, Margaret said bluntly, never one to mince words. After everything you did for her, especially after Thomas died. Rebecca is very focused on maintaining appropriate boundaries, I replied diplomatically. And I do understand the burden an aging parent can represent. Burden? Margaret's eyebrows rose dramatically. You put that girl through college on a principal's salary while renovating the new house for her to come home to during breaks. You worked through summer vacations to pay for her semester abroad. Burden indeed. I hadn't realized Margaret remembered those details of our shared past. You have a good memory. I remember how you supported my Cynthia through her learning difficulties when other administrators wanted to track her into remedial classes, Margaret replied firmly. That girl has a PhD now, thanks largely to your intervention. And I remember plenty more besides. Throughout the evening, similar conversations unfolded with dozens of influential Westfield residents. Charlotte Winters from the Garden Club Rebecca coveted membership in. James Peterson, whose development company Rebecca had been courting for listings. Edward Hamilton, who chaired the country club membership committee Rebecca and Michael had applied to 3 times without success. I never sought these people out specifically. Never directed conversation toward Rebecca's treatment of me. Simply allowed natural interactions to unfold, answering questions honestly when asked about my current circumstances. The growing undercurrent of disapproval toward my daughter was organic, spreading through the gathering like ripples in a pond. Near the end of the evening, Diana drew me aside. Elizabeth, I've been talking with Jonathan and several board members. We'd like to offer you a part-time position coordinating the new intergenerational programs at the hospital. The salary would be modest, but sufficient to restore your independence. I blinked in genuine surprise. This wasn't part of my strategic plan. That's incredibly generous, Diana, but I'm not sure Rebecca would. This isn't about Rebecca, Diana interrupted firmly. This is about the community needing your expertise and you deserving better than your current situation. I felt a complex surge of emotions, gratitude for the sincere offer, vindication that my professional value remained recognized, and a strange sadness that this entire situation had become necessary. Let me think about it, I replied, squeezing her hand. Regardless of my answer, your friendship means more than I can express. When Diana's driver returned me to Rebecca's house well after 10 o'clock, I found my daughter waiting in the darkened living room, a glass of wine in hand. You're late, she observed, her tone carefully neutral. The children missed you at bedtime. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, setting down my purse. How was your evening? Informative, Rebecca said, taking a deliberate sip of wine. I received some interesting phone calls. I waited silently, knowing what was coming. Margaret Whitmore called to reschedule our meeting about the Westlake property listings. Charlotte Winters left a message saying the Garden Club has decided to freeze new memberships temporarily. And most interestingly, Michael got an email from Jonathan Caldwell requesting they postpone further discussion of the development project pending community needs reassessment. Rebecca's gaze was hard now, accusatory. Quite a coincidence. All this happening the evening you attended Diana's gathering. People make their own decisions, Rebecca, I said calmly. I have no control over their business or social choices. But you do have control over the narrative you're sharing about your living situation here. Rebecca set down her glass with deliberate precision. You're portraying yourself as some kind of exploited servant, turning the community against me. I've been entirely truthful about our arrangement. I corrected her. You offered employment, not family support. You specified a uniform, duties, and boundaries. These were your choices, Rebecca, not mine. You're my mother, she hissed, frustration breaking through her controlled facade. You're supposed to support me, not undermine my standing in the community. The irony of her expecting maternal loyalty while offering none in return wasn't lost on me. And you're my daughter. You were supposed to offer compassion during my financial crisis, not conditional shelter predicated on servitude. We stared at each other across the elegant living room, decades of complicated history suspended between us. I saw flickers of the child I had raised, the teenager I had guided through grief after her father's death, the young woman I had launched into the world with every advantage I could provide. But those glimpses were overshadowed by the entitled adult who had reduced family obligation to economic transaction. This isn't what I wanted, Rebecca finally said, her voice softer but still defensive. Nor I agreed quietly. But we are where your choices have led us. I moved toward the hallway, suddenly bone-weary from the evening's emotional exertion. Diana offered me a position coordinating intergenerational programs at the hospital. Part-time, but with adequate salary to rent my own apartment. Rebecca's head snapped up. You're leaving? Considering it, I corrected. The children would still see their grandmother regularly, but on more equitable terms. I left her there in the darkened living room, surrounded by the trappings of the status-focused life she'd built. A life that was beginning to show significant cracks in its foundation. The final phase of my lesson was about to begin. Rebecca's annual garden luncheon had been planned for months, an elaborate affair designed to showcase her home, cement her social position, and subtly promote her real estate business to Westfield's most influential women. 40 invitations had been sent. The caterer and florist had been booked since January. The interior designer had made 3 visits to ensure each room was photographically perfect. What Rebecca hadn't anticipated was that her uniformed mother would now be recognized by virtually every invited guest as the former Principal Stone, mentor and community leader, reduced to serving canapés in her own daughter's home. The morning of the event dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the garden party Rebecca had envisioned as her social crowning achievement. I moved efficiently through my assigned duties, arranging flowers, polishing silver, preparing the guest bathroom with scented soaps and fresh towels. Rebecca supervised with increasing tension, her phone buzzing repeatedly with last-minute cancellations. That's 12, she muttered after ending another call, her fingers white around her phone. 12 cancellations since yesterday. I maintained a neutral expression as I folded linen napkins into precise fans. Perhaps there's another event competing for attention? Rebecca's gaze snapped to me, suspicious and calculating. Like what? I wouldn't know, I replied mildly. I'm not privy to the social calendar. The truth, which Rebecca would soon discover, was that Diana Caldwell had organized an impromptu, educational legacy luncheon at the country club, scheduled directly against Rebecca's event and honoring my contributions to Westfield's educational system. The guest list included most of the women Rebecca had invited, plus additional community leaders who had worked with me over the decades. I had not organized this counter-event, had not suggested it, had not even known about it until Diana called 3 days ago to personally invite me, explaining that the community wants to show its support for your current situation in a tangible way. I had declined as gracefully as possible. I appreciate the gesture more than I can express, Diana, but I can't abandon Rebecca on the day of her important event. Diana's response had been telling. We expected you might feel that way. It shows character that many in this community remember and respect. The luncheon will proceed without you, but with you very much in mind and heart. Now, as Rebecca fielded another cancellation call, I wondered if she had connected the dots yet. If she understood that her social aspirations had collided catastrophically with her treatment of me, creating a perfect storm of community judgment. By 11 o'clock, with the first guests due to arrive at noon, Rebecca had received a total of 27 cancellations. Her carefully planned event of 40 influential women had dwindled to 13, most of them newer acquaintances, without deep community connections. This is a disaster, she muttered, pacing the kitchen where I was arranging petit fours on silver trays. Half the real estate committee, the entire garden club board, even Elaine Montgomery, all canceled. What could possibly be more important today? My phone chimed with a text message. Rebecca glanced over reflexively, then froze as she spotted Diana Caldwell's name on my screen. Why is Diana texting you? I picked up my phone calmly. We've been in regular contact since the Caldwell's dinner here. She's been very supportive. Rebecca's eyes narrowed as she processed this information. What does the text say? I hesitated, then decided transparency would serve my purpose better than concealment. I turned the phone so she could read Diana's message. The Legacy Luncheon is about to begin. 32 attendees confirmed. We all wish you could join us in celebrating your contributions to Westfield, but understand your commitment to family obligations. Everyone sends their support during this difficult transition. Rebecca's face drained of color as comprehension dawned. Legacy luncheon? What is she talking about? I believe Diana organized some sort of appreciation event at the country club. I explained, my tone carefully neutral. She invited me, but of course I declined. My responsibilities today are here. An appreciation event. Today, during my luncheon. Rebecca's voice had gone dangerously quiet. With 32 attendees. Which explains my 27 cancellations. I returned to arranging petit fours. It appears so. And you knew about this? I knew Diana had planned something, yes. I declined her invitation out of loyalty to you. Rebecca's laugh was brittle, verging on hysterical. Loyalty? Is that what you call turning the entire community against me? I set down the serving tray and faced my daughter directly. I have told no lies, Rebecca. I have simply allowed people to see the reality of how you've chosen to treat your mother. Their judgments and decisions are their own. This is revenge, she accused, her voice rising, for asking you to earn your keep instead of living off us for free. This is consequence, I corrected quietly, for reducing family obligation to economic transaction, for treating the woman who raised you alone after your father died as disposable once she faced hardship. I never said you were disposable. I offered a solution. You offered employment, I replied steadily. With a uniform, with duties, with clear boundaries establishing that I was staff, not family. You said, and I quote, I don't feed extra mouths. As if your mother were a stray cat seeking scraps from your table. Rebecca flinched at hearing her words repeated back to her. I was under pressure. The mortgage, the children's activities, Michael's career demands. We are all under pressure, Rebecca. That's when character reveals itself. I gestured to my gray uniform dress. This was your choice. These are the consequences of that choice. The doorbell chimed, announcing the arrival of Rebecca's first guest. She stood frozen, clearly torn between continuing our confrontation and assuming the hostess role she'd been preparing for weeks. Your guests are arriving, I observed mildly. Shall I serve the welcome champagne as planned? For a moment, raw fury flashed across Rebecca's features. Then, with visible effort, she composed herself into the polished socialite she presented to the world.
Yes.
Follow the schedule we discussed. The luncheon proceeded like a slow-motion train wreck. The 13 women who did attend, mostly newer Westfield residents without deep community ties, were seated at tables originally arranged for 40, creating vast empty spaces that highlighted the event's failure. Conversation was stilted, with several guests clearly uncomfortable as they watched me serve food and drinks in my uniform, now recognizing me as the principal stone being celebrated simultaneously at the country club. I performed my duties impeccably, professional and pleasant, allowing no hint of satisfaction to show as Rebecca struggled to maintain her hostess facade amid the social disaster unfolding in her garden. Several guests made awkward attempts to engage me directly, clearly uncertain how to reconcile my current role with my former status. Principal Stone, Mrs. I'm sorry, how should I address you? Asked Jennifer Hayes, a relatively new arrival to Westfield whose daughter attended the high school. Elizabeth is fine, I replied warmly as I offered the dessert tray. My daughter Mackenzie has the scholarship you established before retiring, Jennifer continued. The one for young women pursuing education careers. I didn't realize you were Rebecca's mother. Rebecca, within earshot, stiffened visibly. How wonderful about Mackenzie, I said sincerely. The future of education depends on bright young minds like hers. The Scholarship Foundation is honoring you at their fall gala, Jennifer added. They've been trying to reach you. I suppose now I understand why those communications went unanswered. I could almost feel Rebecca's discomfort radiating across the table. My current position doesn't leave much time for correspondence, I explained. Perhaps they could reach me through Diana Caldwell? She's been helping me reconnect with professional contacts. The subtle reminder of Diana, and by extension, the competing luncheon currently underway, hung in the air like a thunder cloud. Rebecca quickly steered the conversation towards safer topics, but the damage had been done. Throughout the abbreviated event, several guests made early departures with transparent excuses. Similar moments accumulated, each one another crack in Rebecca's carefully constructed social facade. By 3 o'clock, the garden was empty of guests, the catering staff was clearing away mostly untouched food, and Rebecca sat alone at the head table, staring sightlessly at the elaborate centerpiece she'd selected weeks ago. I approached quietly, still in my uniform but no longer performing hostess duties. Would you like me to bring you something? Tea, perhaps? Rebecca looked up, her expression a complex mixture of anger, humiliation, and dawning comprehension.
Why?
Why did you do this instead of just telling me how you felt? Would you have listened? I asked simply. When you reduced me to economic utility, would words alone have made you understand what that meant? She had no immediate answer. I raised you to recognize the difference between what people say and what they do, I continued. Your words claimed family support while your actions communicated that I was a burden to be managed. I simply allowed your community to see that disconnect. You've destroyed my standing in Westfield, Rebecca said, her voice hollow. The real estate committee, the garden club, the country club membership we've been waiting for, all gone. Perhaps, I acknowledged. Or perhaps this is an opportunity to reconsider what truly matters. Status? Social climbing? Or family connection that transcends financial circumstance? Rebecca's phone chimed with a text message. She glanced at it, then closed her eyes briefly, as if in pain. Michael's development project has been officially declined by the hospital board. Jonathan Caldwell cited misalignment with community values as the primary reason. I felt a momentary pang of regret for Michael, who had been largely peripheral to Rebecca's treatment of me. But he had been a willing bystander, never intervening even when witnessing my reduced status in their home. I'm sorry things have unfolded this way, I said and meant it. Taking satisfaction in justice was different from enjoying my daughter's pain, regardless of how warranted the lesson might be. Are you? Rebecca's gaze sharpened. You systematically turned my social connections against me, undermined my professional relationships, and publicly humiliated me in front of the entire community. I allowed the community to see how you treat family, I corrected. Their responses reflect their own values, not my orchestration. And Rebecca? I leaned closer. I did all this while continuing to care for your children, maintain your home, and support your day-to-day life. I fulfilled every duty you assigned me, even while you reduced me to those duties. The irony wasn't lost on her. Rebecca had the grace to look momentarily ashamed before defensiveness reasserted itself. What happens now? More public humiliation? More sabotage of my professional life? That depends entirely on you. I straightened, decision crystallizing. Diana's job offer at the hospital remains open. I've decided to accept it. The salary will allow me to rent a small apartment and regain my independence. You're leaving. It wasn't quite a question. I'm establishing appropriate boundaries, I replied, echoing her earlier justification. This arrangement isn't healthy for either of us. And the children? They adore you. I'll always be their grandmother, I assured her. My relationship with them is separate from the consequences of your choices. They can visit me regularly, and I'm happy to help with childcare when needed, as family, not as staff. Rebecca was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. Finally, she asked the question that revealed she still didn't fully grasp the depth of what had occurred. How long will it take for this to blow over? For people to forget? People don't forget how you treat the vulnerable in your care, I said gently. Especially not in a community like Westfield, where I spent decades building relationships based on integrity and mutual respect. This isn't something to blow over, Rebecca. It's a fundamental reassessment of who you are. The caterers finished packing their equipment, leaving us alone in the garden surrounded by the elaborate decorations that had been meant to showcase Rebecca's social triumph. Now they seemed merely excessive, emblems of misplaced priorities. I need time to think, Rebecca said finally. This is overwhelming. Of course. I began removing my uniform apron. I'll be moving my things to a hotel tomorrow. Diana has offered her guest house until I can secure an apartment. So quickly? Alarm flashed across Rebecca's features. There's no need to rush. I think we both need space to recalibrate, I replied firmly. The children will adjust more easily if we present this transition positively. As I turned to leave, Rebecca called after me, a note of desperate realization in her voice. Mom, did you plan this all along? From the moment I offered you the nanny position? I paused, considering her question carefully. Not specifically. But I did decide immediately that I wouldn't allow your assessment of my worth to stand unchallenged. The methods evolved as I observed what truly mattered to you. And if I had offered you a home as family rather than employment as staff, then none of this would have been necessary, I answered simply. That evening, as I packed my modest belongings in the guest room that had never been allowed to feel like mine, my phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from community members who had attended Diana's luncheon. Expressions of support, offers of temporary housing, invitations to rejoin boards and committees I had served on before retirement. The contrast between the community's response to me and their judgment of Rebecca couldn't have been starker. I had spent decades building relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. Rebecca had approached those same relationships as transactions to advance her status. When crisis revealed our true characters, the community had responded accordingly. Around 9 o'clock, a text arrived from Diana. The legacy luncheon was a tremendous success. Everyone sends their love and support. The hospital board officially approved your position today. Start whenever you're ready. And Elizabeth? I hope you know how valued you are. Not for what you do, but for who you are. As I read her message, something tight inside me finally began to unravel, the knot of hurt that had formed when my own daughter had reduced me to economic utility. Diana's words reflected what families should have provided: unconditional recognition of intrinsic worth, not contingent upon productivity or convenience. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. I opened the door to find Sophia, my 10-year-old granddaughter, standing in the hallway in her pajamas. "Grandma? Mom said you're leaving tomorrow." My heart constricted. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm going to get my own apartment nearby." "Because Mom made you be our nanny instead of just our grandma?" Her perception startled me. "It's complicated, Sophia." "Not really." She twisted the end of her braid, a gesture reminiscent of Rebecca at the same age. "Mom treated you like an employee when you needed family. That's why everyone is mad at her now." Children often cut through adult complexities with devastating clarity. "How do you know people are mad at Mom?" "I heard her talking to Dad. And Mrs. Hayes said something at the luncheon about Mom making you wear a uniform." She looked really uncomfortable. Sophia's gaze was direct, intelligent. "You used to be the principal. You helped lots of people. And then Mom made you serve desserts when you needed help instead." I sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed and patting the space beside me. Sophia joined me, leaning against my shoulder in a way that made my heart ache. "Your mother and I need to work some things out," I explained carefully. "But that has nothing to do with my relationship with you, Max, and Amelia. I'll always be your grandmother, no matter where I live." "Will we still see you?" "Of course. I'll be close by, and you can visit whenever you want. We'll have special grandmother-grandchildren days." Sophia considered this, then nodded decisively. "That's better anyway. Mom's always telling you what to do here. In your own place, you can be in charge again." Her assessment was so accurate, it nearly brought tears to my eyes. "That's right. Now, you should get back to bed before your mother checks on you." After Sophia left, I sat for a long time looking at the partially packed suitcase on my bed. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter. Independence reclaimed, professional value reaffirmed, dignity restored. My relationship with Rebecca would be forever altered, the easy maternal bond replaced by something more cautious, more conditional. Was it worth it? Had the lesson been too harsh, the consequences too severe? I thought of Rebecca's cold assessment. "I don't feed extra mouths." Of the uniform she'd presented with businesslike efficiency. Of the boundaries she'd established to ensure I understood my place as staff, not family. Yes, the lesson had been harsh, but it was proportional to the callousness of her actions. And perhaps, in time, it would lead to genuine understanding rather than mere compliance driven by social consequence. As I finished packing, I found myself hoping, despite everything, that Rebecca might eventually grasp the true meaning behind what had unfolded. Not simply that treating family as disposable carried social penalties, but that human worth transcended economic productivity. That family bonds, when healthy, provided unconditional safety during life's inevitable crises. That lesson, painful as it had been to deliver, was one she urgently needed to learn, not just for my sake, but for her own humanity and for the values she would pass to my grandchildren. The community center auditorium was filled to capacity for the Educational Legacy Foundation's annual scholarship gala. From my position at the head table, I could see familiar faces from every phase of my career: former students, teachers, parents, board members, community leaders. The intergenerational program I now directed at the hospital had quickly become a model for similar initiatives across the region, and tonight's event partially celebrated its success. But the primary purpose was awarding scholarships to promising young educators, continuing the work I had begun decades earlier. The foundation had named their premier award after me, The Elizabeth Stone Excellence in Education Scholarship, a recognition that still felt somewhat surreal. Diana Caldwell, resplendent in emerald green, leaned toward me from her seat beside me. The turnout is remarkable. We had to add 3 extra tables at the last minute. It's for a worthy cause, I demurred. Supporting the next generation of teachers benefits the entire community. True, but they're also here for you, Diana insisted. Your return to public life has been the talk of Westfield for months. I smiled noncommittally, scanning the room again. My gaze caught on a table near the back where 3 familiar faces watched me intently, my grandchildren, dressed in their finest clothes, practically vibrating with excitement at being included in this adult event. Beside them sat Michael, looking somewhat uncomfortable in his tuxedo but making a visible effort to engage with the proceedings. Rebecca's seat remained conspicuously empty. Since my departure from their home 6 months earlier, my relationship with Rebecca had consisted primarily of carefully polite exchanges during grandchildren handoffs. She had never explicitly apologized for her treatment of me, though her behavior had shifted to cautious respect, perhaps driven more by social necessity than genuine remorse. Westfield's judgment had been swift and comprehensive. Rebecca's real estate business had suffered significantly as influential clients took their listings elsewhere. The country club membership had been firmly denied. Social invitations had dwindled to a trickle. The community had made its values clear, treating family, especially a mother with Rebecca's standing, as disposable help was beyond acceptable boundaries. I took no joy in these consequences, but neither did I intervene to mitigate them. Rebecca's rebuilding of her reputation would need to come through her own genuine efforts, not my intercession. Meanwhile, I had focused on rebuilding my life, securing a pleasant apartment near the hospital, reconnecting with professional networks, and establishing healthy boundaries with family. The grandchildren visited regularly, our relationship flourishing without the uncomfortable power dynamic Rebecca had created. Michael had made awkward but seemingly sincere efforts to maintain cordial relations, perhaps recognizing belatedly that social capital in Westfield was influenced by factors beyond financial success. As for Rebecca herself, my thoughts were interrupted by a commotion at the entrance. Heads turned as Rebecca hurried in, looking flustered and apologetic as she made her way to the family table. She kissed her children quickly, exchanged words with Michael, then, to my surprise, began walking directly toward the head table. Diana noticed my attention shift and followed my gaze. "Well," she murmured, "this is unexpected." Rebecca reached our table, visibly nervous but determined. "Mom, I'm so sorry I'm late. There was an issue with the babysitter for the Peterson showing, and then traffic was terrible, and she stopped herself, taking a deep breath. I'm here now. I wouldn't miss this for anything." Her presence was genuinely unexpected. While Michael had RSVP'd for himself and the children, Rebecca had sent regrets, citing a work commitment. "I'm glad you could make it," I said carefully, unsure of her motivations. "Could we speak privately for a moment?" she asked, glancing at Diana and the others at the head table. "Before the program begins?" Diana nodded encouragingly. "You have about 10 minutes before we need to start." I followed Rebecca to a quiet corner of the auditorium, curious but guarded about this unusual initiation of contact. "You look wonderful," Rebecca said once we were relatively private. "The hospital position clearly agrees with you." "Thank you. It's been fulfilling work." I studied her face, noting signs of strain beneath her carefully applied makeup. "Is everything all right, Rebecca? You said you couldn't attend tonight." She fidgeted with her clutch bag, uncharacteristically uncertain.
Elite.
"I was planning to come all along, but I wasn't sure how I'd be received. If I'd be welcome." "It's a public event," I pointed out. "And your children are being recognized as my family." "That's just it. Rebecca met my eyes directly, for perhaps the first time since our confrontation. Family. I've been thinking about that word a lot these past months. What it means. What it requires. I waited, sensing she had rehearsed whatever came next. When you needed family support, I offered employment, she continued, her voice low but steady. I thought I was being practical, but the truth is, I was being selfish and cruel. I treated you as disposable once you became financially inconvenient, after a lifetime of you treating me as precious regardless of circumstance. The frank acknowledgement, something I had never expected to hear, caught me off guard. Rebecca, please let me finish. She took a deep breath. What happened afterward, the community's response, the social consequences, that was justified. Painful but deserved. It forced me to recognize what I had become and how far I had strayed from the values you raised me with. Tears glimmered in her eyes, but she maintained her composure. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. I don't deserve either yet. What I'm asking for is the chance to demonstrate, over time, that I've learned from this, that I understand what family truly means. I studied my daughter's face, searching for signs of manipulation or mere social calculation. What I saw instead surprised me. Genuine remorse, yes, but also something more fundamental, comprehension of the underlying principle I had tried to teach. The foundation asked if I wanted to say a few words tonight. Rebecca continued when I didn't immediately respond. About being raised by an educator who shaped so many lives. I declined because I haven't earned that right. Not yet. But I'm working to become worthy of being publicly acknowledged as your daughter again. Her vulnerability in that moment. The admission of unworthiness, the absence of entitlement, suggested a depth of reflection I hadn't thought her capable of. Perhaps the harsh lesson had penetrated more deeply than I'd realized. The children miss you at the house, she added softly. Not as their nanny, as their grandmother. If you'd consider Sunday dinners or whatever arrangement feels comfortable for you, not out of obligation, but as a freely chosen family connection, they would be thrilled.
So would I.
The invitation held none of the assumptions or conditions that had characterized our previous interactions. It acknowledged my autonomy, my right to establish boundaries based on my own comfort rather than others' convenience. Before I could formulate a response, Diana approached to indicate the program needed to begin. Rebecca nodded understanding. We can discuss this another time, she said. Tonight is about celebrating your legacy, not addressing our issues. She hesitated, then added, I'm proud to be here as your daughter, Mom, even if I haven't always acted like one deserving of you. As Rebecca returned to her family's table and I took my place at the podium, I found myself contemplating the unexpected evolution of our situation. The lesson I had orchestrated had been designed to create social consequences, to teach through the reflection of community values what direct confrontation could not achieve. I had never anticipated it might lead to genuine insight or authentic remorse. Looking out at the audience as I began my remarks about educational legacy, I saw Rebecca sitting beside her children, her attention focused intently on me, her expression a complex mixture of regret and respect. Beside her, Sophia beamed with undisguised pride, occasionally whispering to her brothers about Grandma the principal. The revenge I had executed had achieved its primary goal. Rebecca would never again mistake my value for my economic utility, never again reduce family obligation to transactional exchange. The social consequences had been comprehensive and appropriate to her actions. But perhaps, unexpectedly, something more valuable had emerged from those consequences. The beginning of genuine understanding. Not reconciliation. That would require sustained demonstration of changed perspective, not mere words, but the foundation upon which healthier boundaries might eventually be built. As I concluded my speech to enthusiastic applause, I found myself meeting Rebecca's gaze across the crowded room. She nodded slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement and respect rather than presumed connection. I returned the nod, equally measured. We had both learned powerful lessons these past months. Mine was that standing firm for one's inherent dignity, refusing to accept devaluation even from family, was not selfishness, but necessary self-preservation. Hers, it seemed, was that treating family as disposable during crisis revealed a fundamental character flaw that carried consequences beyond mere domestic discomfort. Whether these lessons would lead to eventual healing remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. Neither of us would ever return to the dynamic she had established with that gray uniform and those coldly efficient words, "I don't feed extra mouths." Some prices, once named, can never be unnamed. Some lessons, once taught, can never be untaught. And some journeys, once begun, lead to destinations neither traveler could have anticipated. If you found yourself captivated by Elizabeth's journey from exploited mother to architect of perfect social justice, subscribe to our YouTube channel for more riveting stories of sweet revenge and karmic comeuppance. Our daily uploads feature ordinary people who refuse to be victims and instead orchestrated brilliant responses to those who wrong them. Like this video if you believe family should never be treated as disposable, and hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest stories of satisfying revenge. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have handled things differently than Elizabeth, or did her daughter get exactly what she deserved? Join our growing community of viewers who know that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud and dramatic, but quiet, strategic, and absolutely devastating.